Welcome to the law offices of Chris M. Ingram's Immigration News Show. Today we ask STEM pros. Are you ready? We would like to thank attorney Chris M. Ingram and staff at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram for their hard work in preparing the research for this show, which draws on a wide variety of news sources from both sides of the aisle, providing a balanced view. Attorney Ingram is also a vocal advocate for the rights and protection of immigration applicants, although our coverage is designed to be nonpartisan. Please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. We are also on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Reddit, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. You can also visit our website on www.breakthroughusa.com. We'd love to see you there. Disclaimer. Please note that this presentation should not be intended as legal advice for your specific situation. If you, a friend, or a family member would like a free consultation, you can visit our website at www.breakthroughusa.com and schedule an appointment. We'd love to hear from you and help you, if we can. We'd also like to point out that this presentation was created using AI hosts. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get right into it because today's topic is just incredible.
It really is. I mean, imagine this, right? Imagine holding 3 separate job offers from, like, the biggest tech giants on Earth.
Oh, man. The dream.
Right.
Yeah.
And we are talking compensation packages hovering around $500,000 each. Like, you are at the absolute top of your field.
Which you're totally invincible.
Exactly. But now imagine watching all 3 of those offers just, evaporate into thin air in less than 48 hours.
Which is just gut-wrenching.
Totally. And not because you failed a background check or because your skills suddenly became obsolete, but because some corporate finance officer got spooked that the global price of copper went up.
Right. Or some supply chain snag in Taiwan delayed a hardware shipment by 6 months.
Yes. So today, based on this really extensive legal research from our team, we are pulling back the curtain on what is probably the most dizzying, high-stakes contradiction happening in the U.S. economy right now.
It's a massive paradox, yeah.
It is. We're looking at this brutal global war for elite STEM talent and how the massive friction of, corporate bureaucracy and supply chain chaos is causing employer sponsorships to just vanish overnight.
Literally overnight.
Yeah. But more importantly, if you are listening to this right now and you're caught in this visa limbo, we are going to explore the precise strategic moves top professionals are making to turn this vulnerability into a huge career advantage.
Because it really is an unprecedented landscape out there. You have this emotional and professional paradox facing highly skilled immigrants today that is just, it's gut-wrenching.
It really is. You feel so powerless.
Right. You might be a top-tier artificial intelligence engineer or a semiconductor fabrication specialist, and on Monday, you are being aggressively hunted by top corporate recruiters.
Right. They're flying you out, taking you to
Exactly. They're rolling out the red carpet. You feel entirely in control. And then by Thursday, the calls just stop.
A hiring freeze is announced. And it leaves these incredibly brilliant professionals feeling completely trapped in this state of employer dependency.
Which is just crazy when you think about it.
It is. You possess the exact specialized skills that the United States economy desperately needs to function over the next decade. Yet structurally, you are left feeling entirely powerless.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to break down exactly how we got here, because the software and AI side of this economic landscape is producing some really wild mixed signals.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's look at the baseline numbers from our legal team's research. Right now, general U.S. unemployment is hovering around that 4.3 to 4.6% mark.
Which is pretty typical.
Right. But general tech hiring across the board feels incredibly cautious. We've all seen the headlines, right? Tech companies quietly restructuring, laying off middle management.
Going back on expansive growth, yeah.
Exactly. But then you walk across the hall to the AI and machine learning departments, and it is a completely different universe. Right. It's literally a tale of 2 entirely different economies existing inside the exact same companies.
Which is mind-blowing. There is an absolute explosion in demand, specifically for AI engineers, machine learning specialists, data scientists, and advanced cybersecurity experts.
The demand is just off the charts.
Yeah. You've got the giants, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and they are fighting an absolute bloodbath of a talent war for this tiny elite pool of workers.
Like a feeding frenzy, in one specific room of a massive corporate headquarters.
Yes. While in all the other rooms, they are literally unscrewing the light bulbs to save on electricity.
That's a perfect way to put it. And if you are the talent caught in the middle of that, the psychological toll is just profound.
I can't even imagine.
The irony here is just so incredibly thick. You hold the keys to American AI dominance. Our attorneys highlighted a 2026 Boston Consulting Group study showing that artificial intelligence is actively reshaping more than half of all U.S. jobs.
More than half. Wow.
Right. The overarching demand is undeniable. It's an existential priority for these companies. Yet simultaneously, you, as an immigrant professional, face extreme vulnerability because of internal corporate, quote-unquote, budget caution.
Right. The budget caution just ruins everything.
Exactly. And you have to understand the mechanics of how this works. You have massive macro-level economic fears overriding micro-level departmental desperation.
Like the department heads are begging for help.
Yes. An AI product manager might be practically begging for an advanced data scientist to launch a feature that will secure, $1 billion in market share.
But their hands are tied.
Right, because the overarching corporate caution freezes the legal process of hiring them.
Let's put a human face on this because the legal research our team put together has some incredible case studies. Like, there's the story of Wei.
Oh, Wei's story is so common right now.
It really is. He's a Taiwanese AI researcher, and he was working on OPT. Now, for our listeners who haven't lived through the anxiety of OPT optional practical training, it is essentially a ticking clock.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, it's a temporary work permit that international students get after graduating from a U.S. university. The catch is the clock starts counting down, and if you don't secure a more permanent visa, like an H-1B, before that timer hits 0, you pack your bags.
Right. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD from MIT, you are out.
Exactly. It's an incredibly stressful status to hold. You are hyper-aware of the calendar every single day.
Oh, you check it constantly.
So Wei is on this ticking clock, right? And he lives this exact roller coaster we are talking about. Because of his specialized AI background, he receives 3 competing offers in a single week.
3 offers. That's huge.
3. He must have felt like he had finally secured his future. But then, just 2 days later, the main corporate sponsor backed away.
Unbelievable.
The recruiter called him and cited internal budget caution. Wei told our researchers that he lay awake at night, replaying every single conversation in his head, wondering what he did wrong.
Which is the saddest part, because he did nothing wrong.
Right. He was wondering if his American dream, the years of study, sacrifice was just ending right at the exact moment it felt perfectly within reach.
It's a devastating scenario.
Yeah.
And what makes it worse is exactly what you just said. His skills didn't degrade. The technology didn't change.
Yep.
What changed was a spreadsheet on the desk of a chief financial officer who doesn't even know Wai's name.
It's just so cold.
It is. And the legal research details another experience that echoes this perfectly. We have the story of Rahul, who is a machine learning PhD and an H-1B visa.
And an H-1B is the primary work visa for specialized skills, right?
Yeah.
But it directly ties you to the employer.
Yes, exactly. The H-1B is an employer-sponsored visa. If you lose your job on an H-1B, you typically have a 60-day grace period to find a new employer willing to take over that sponsorship.
60 days is nothing.
It's nothing. Or, again, you have to leave the country. So your ability to live in the U.S. is entirely chained to your employer's willingness and financial ability to sponsor you. So Rahul is watching general tech hiring freeze all around him. His colleagues in other departments are getting nervous. Companies are issuing broad hiring freezes.
It's just a terrible environment.
Yeah. Yet, because he has this hyper-niche machine learning expertise, recruiters from 3 of his dream companies were aggressively chasing him within a 48-hour window.
Wow.
He described the feeling to our team as being simultaneously powerful and completely exposed.
That is such a vivid way to describe it.
Right. That is the absolute reality of the STEM talent war right now. The market is screaming that it needs your brain, but the administrative bureaucratic mechanisms of the corporations are malfunctioning due to fear.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really need to try to understand the logic here. It feels insane.
It does.
If these companies are in an existential war for AI dominance, and they absolutely are, why would a trillion-dollar company risk losing top-tier AI talent over temporary macro caution?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. It's like holding a winning lottery ticket, but the bank suddenly tells you they are too nervous to cash it. I mean, think of corporate HR like a submarine's blast doors.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. When the CFO sees a bad quarter or, a supply chain delay, they sound the alarm. The blast doors slam shut to preserve the budget.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if the AI department is screaming that they need this one specific engineer to navigate the submarine. The doors are sealed. But why? Why sacrifice the exact talent they need to survive just to save a few bucks on a quarterly earnings report?
I mean, it seems entirely counterintuitive, but you have to understand how corporate bureaucracy scales. Macro hesitation almost always overrides localized departmental needs.
Even when the department is working on the most important stuff.
Exactly, because the mechanisms of hiring are centralized. Let's look at the mechanics. Even if an AI product team desperately needs a data scientist, they don't operate in a vacuum.
Right.
Sweeping HR policies and legal department mandates regarding visa sponsorship are blunt instruments. When the CFO of a massive tech conglomerate says, we need to cut costs by 10% and pause all complex hiring to weather this economic uncertainty, that directive sweeps across the entire board.
So they don't look at it case by case like, oh, this guy is an AI genius, let's make an exception.
Rarely.
Okay.
The corporate legal team looks at the cost, the timeline, and the perceived risk of an H-1B transfer or a permanent residency sponsorship, and they just hit pause.
Unbelievable.
And we have to talk about the timeline, because this is crucial. The legacy immigration system is fundamentally incompatible with the speed of the tech sector.
How so?
Well, if a company wants to sponsor you for a green card through the traditional PRM labor certification process, they have to go through the Department of Labor.
Okay.
They have to get a prevailing wage determination, which is essentially the government calculating exactly what you should be paid to ensure you aren't undercutting American workers.
Sounds reasonable in theory.
In theory. But that single step, just getting the prevailing wage, can take 6 to 8 months right now.
Wait, really? Just to get a number from the government?
Yes.
Yes.
6 to 8 months just for a number. Then they have to conduct a mandatory recruitment period to prove they couldn't find a U.S. worker for the job.
Right, running ads and all that.
Yeah. Then they file the actual PRM application, which takes another year to process. You're looking at a process that takes 18 to 24 months, minimum, just to get the foundational paperwork approved.
But the AI industry reinvents itself every 6 months. I mean, 18 months ago, we didn't even have half the generative AI models we are using today.
Exactly. That is the core conflict. The Department of Labor and USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, operate on a 1990s bureaucratic timeline, while the AI industry operates on a 6-month cycle.
That's a huge disconnect.
So when that CFO looks at a 24-month, highly expensive, highly uncertain PRM labor certification process during an economic downturn, it is the easiest thing in the world for them to just cancel it.
So the bureaucracy essentially sabotages the company's own strategic goals.
Spot on. And the casualty is the immigrant professional caught in the middle who now has 60 days to pack up their life.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because those AI models OpenAI and Google are fighting for, they don't exist in a vacuum.
No, they don't.
They need extreme computing power, which brings us to a physical roadblock that is freezing visas just as fast as corporate caution, because all of that software, all of those brilliant machine learning algorithms, they do not run on air.
They require massive, incredibly complex hardware.
Right. And this is where the legal research takes a fascinating turn. Moving from the digital software space into the physical world, the AI boom is entirely dependent on semiconductors. And physical supply chain bottlenecks are creating a completely different, yet equally stressful, immigration crisis.
The hardware aspect is really the bedrock of the entire global tech ecosystem. I mean, you cannot have artificial intelligence without advanced semiconductor chips.
It's physically impossible.
Exactly. And right now, the United States is aggressively, frantically trying to secure that bedrock within its own borders. If we look at the legal research from attorney Chris Ingram, they highlight the massive geopolitical impact of the GHEPS and Science Act.
The GHEPS, yeah, let's define that for a second because it gets thrown around in the news a lot.
Yeah.
This is the federal government essentially pouring billions of dollars into subsidies, right?
Right.
To convince companies to build chip manufacturing plants, which they call fabs here in the U.S., instead of in Asia. Is that right?
Correct. It is a multi-billion-dollar industrial policy aimed at national security. Because, you know, if a conflict were to happen in Taiwan, where the vast majority of advanced chips are currently made, the global economy would virtually halt.
It would be devastating.
So we are seeing unprecedented investments being poured into these U.S. fabs. You have Intel building in Ohio. You have TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, building massive facilities in Arizona, Samsung in Texas.
These aren't just normal factories, though.
No, these are multi-billion-dollar, hyper-complex physical facilities.
But you can't just build a building and call it a fab. You need the people.
And that is the exact wall they are hitting. There is a severe, almost crippling domestic talent shortage. A semiconductor fab isn't just a factory. It requires clean rooms that are thousands of times cleaner than a surgical operating room.
Wow. Thousands of times.
Yeah. It requires extreme precision engineering at the atomic level. And the U.S. simply does not have enough domestic chip designers, lithography experts, and fabrication process specialists to deliver on these massive projects.
You can't just retrain a software guy in a weekend.
Not at all. You cannot just take a software developer and tell them to go run a semiconductor etching machine. It takes a decade to train a top-tier process engineer.
Okay, so they absolutely need foreign talent to staff these fabs, but they are also hitting literal physical walls with the supply chain. Because the research from our attorneys points out these critical mineral shortages, we are talking about materials most people rarely think about. Gallium, germanium, rare earths, copper, tungsten, these are the literal building blocks of the modern tech world.
Yes. Let's take gallium, for example. You don't just dig gallium out of a mine in chunks.
You don't.
No, it's usually a byproduct of mining bauxite for aluminum or zinc ores. It requires complex refinement. And gallium is absolutely essential for high-frequency chips, the kind used in 5G networks, advanced radar systems, and aerospace applications.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, the global supply chain for these minerals is heavily concentrated geopolitically, often in countries that the U.S. has tense trade relations with.
Right, so geopolitics directly impacts the supply chain. If a country decides to restrict the export of gallium or germanium, which has literally happened recently, the global market panics.
Exactly. And these material shortages are creating major bottlenecks across multiple industries. They are slowing down electric vehicle production, defense projects, the construction of the massive data centers needed to cool AI servers.
And of course, the expansion of these very semiconductor fabs that the CHPS Act is trying to fund.
Precisely.
But here is the mechanism that our listeners really need to understand. How does a shortage of a mineral like tungsten or copper halfway across the world translate into a visa extension delay for an engineer sitting in Arizona?
It happens through the cascade of corporate finance.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's say a major semiconductor company is building a $2 billion expansion to a fab in Arizona. They have a massive team of immigrant process engineers on H-1B visas working on it. But suddenly, the supply chain for the specialized copper wiring needed for the high-voltage data center gets bottlenecked.
Or the rare earth magnets for the cooling system.
Exactly. The materials are delayed by 8 months.
So the project just can't move forward.
Right. The physical construction halts. And when a multi-billion-dollar physical project faces a massive delay, the corporate budget associated with that project instantly freezes.
Ah, I see.
The capital expenditure is paused. The CFO looks at the spreadsheet and says, "We aren't spending another dime on the Arizona expansion until the copper arrives."
And inevitably, that financial freeze trickles down to human resources.
Exactly. HR is told to halt all administrative spending for that department. So when the H-1B extension comes up for the vital process engineer working on that very project, HR refuses to pay the legal fees and filing costs to renew it because the budget code is frozen.
Wow.
Sponsorship is canceled.
The human cost of that systemic failure is just staggering. It's infuriating.
It really is.
You finally got your family together on a H-1B. Your American dream begins. Your employer files for your EB-2 green card, but the wait is over 11 years. As the years go by, frustration grows, and now the company is talking about layoffs. This could be the end of your American dream. You search for help, but luckily, you land on BreakthroughUSA.com. They listen, reassured you, and built your EB-1 case with precision. Then one day, a notification buzzes, EB-1 approved. With your EB-1 green card, your entire family can breathe.
I have got my visa. I got my visa.
That's why the law offices of Chris M. Ingram is trusted. Your future shouldn't wait. Let's talk EB-1.
What are the next steps?
Need help with your visa? Book your free consultation now at www.breakthroughUSA.com and let us take care of you.
Our team's research shared the story of Arjun, who is a fab process engineer from India. He is literally working on U.S. chip independence. His specific job is a stated national security priority for the United States government.
He's essential.
But he described to our researchers the raw emotion of knowing that despite his absolutely critical role, every single time his visa extension came up, he felt like his entire career and life could vanish overnight.
It's terrifying for them.
He's standing in a multi-hundred-million-dollar clean room facility, knowing his expertise is essential to making the machines work, and yet a piece of paper getting delayed in an HR office because of a global tungsten shortage makes him feel entirely disposable.
And we see the exact same dynamic in material science. Dr. Priya's experience, detailed in the legal research, is a perfect example of this cascading failure.
Oh, right, the battery technology researcher.
Yes, she's an elite material scientist working on next-generation battery technology. This is crucial for electric vehicles and grid storage. She told her researchers about the quiet dread she felt every single week, watching massive research projects get delayed by these material shortages.
Because the raw components for the battery prototypes aren't arriving.
Exactly, so the project pauses. And when the project pauses, the funding grant pauses. And when the funding pauses, her own immigration timeline suddenly feels incredibly fragile.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah. She called it exhausting to feel so close to making a real, tangible impact on sustainable energy, yet always remaining one bureaucratic step away from actual stability.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, or at least point out the absolute absurdity of this governmental structure.
Please do.
You're telling me the U.S. government passes the CHIP ES Act explicitly stating we desperately need to build these fabs for national security.
Right.
They literally cannot build them without people like Arjun, and they can't advance the necessary battery tech to power the future without Dr. Priya. Isn't the government shooting itself in the foot?
What's fascinating here...
It's like, by allowing integration friction, a slow purr process, a convoluted H-1B lottery to threaten the very goals these fabs were built to achieve, it seems like they are sabotaging their own multi-billion-dollar industrial policy.
Oh, 100%.
If I'm the Secretary of Commerce, I'm banging on the door of USCIS demanding these visas be approved yesterday.
You would think so, right. And logically, you're entirely correct. But what's fascinating here is that this systemic disconnect is exactly why waiting for sweeping congressional immigration reform is, as the legal research puts it, pure election season theater. You have to understand that the government is not a single rational monolith. It is a collection of competing priorities, isolated departments, and incredibly slow-moving bureaucracies.
The left hand literally doesn't talk to the right hand.
Exactly. The industrial policy arm of the government, the Department of Commerce, pushes the GPS Act and hands out billions in grants to build the physical fabs.
Okay.
But the immigration apparatus, USCIS, and the Department of Labor operates on outdated, friction-heavy legacy systems designed in 1990. They are mandated to protect domestic labor markets, even when the domestic labor market literally doesn't possess the required skills.
Right, because the skills didn't even exist in 1990.
Exactly. They don't have a fast-track button that says, CHIPS Act essential personnel. So you have an industrial policy moving at the speed of modern geopolitics, tied to an immigration system moving at the speed of a dial-up modem.
That is such a depressing but accurate visual.
The system, as it currently functions, is disjointed. It will not save these professionals. They have to save themselves.
Which logically brings us to the core strategy we need to talk about today, breaking that dependency.
Yes, the strategic shift.
Because if you are listening to this and you realize that macro caution, budget freezes, and physical supply chain issues make massive corporate employers inherently unreliable sponsors, we need to explore the ultimate solution outlined in the legal research.
Which is removing the employer from the equation entirely.
Right. So what does this all mean? How do we do that?
Well, when external uncontrollable forces create this level of career uncertainty, the clearest thinking STEM professionals are pivoting immediately. They are turning to self-petition strategies.
Self-petitioning. Let's dig into that.
Specifically, we are talking about two main pathways, the EB-1A for extraordinary ability and the EB-2 NIW, which stands for National Interest Waiver.
Let's define these mechanically because they sound great, but what actually are they?
Both of these are pathways to permanent residency, a green card that fundamentally changed the power dynamic because they are fully under the applicant's control.
Wow, fully under your control.
Yes. You do not need a company to sponsor you. You do not need a corporate legal team to approve the budget. You do not have to wait for the Department of Labor to issue a prevailing wage or go through the PRM recruitment process.
That skips so much headache.
Exactly. You, the individual, petition the U.S. government directly. It completely removes employer hesitation from the picture.
Okay, but let me push back. If these massive tech companies with armies of high-paid corporate lawyers are failing to secure these visas or too bogged down in the bureaucracy to try, how on earth is a single engineer or scientist supposed to convince USCIS on their own?
That's a fair question.
What does it actually take to qualify for an EB-2 NIW, for example?
That is exactly where specialized legal strategy comes in. To qualify for a national interest waiver, you generally have to satisfy what's known in immigration law as the Donisar framework.
The Donisar framework.
Yeah, I won't get too bogged down in the legal weeds, but essentially, it's a three-pronged test. First, you have to prove that your proposed endeavor, your work, has both substantial merit and national importance.
Okay. Merit and national importance.
Second, you have to prove that you are well-positioned to advance that endeavor, meaning your past record of success, your degrees, your patents, your publications prove you can actually do what you claim.
Right, you can't just have an idea, you have to have the track record.
Exactly. And third, you have to prove that on balance, it would be beneficial to the United States to waive the standard requirement of a job offer and a labor certification.
So it's not just saying, I have a master's degree in computer science, let me stay. You have to connect your specific brain to a national priority.
Precisely. And this requires a profound mindset shift for you, the listener. Usually you look at supply chain shortages, like the lack of gallium or macroeconomic caution, as terrifying threats to your livelihood.
Of course, because it gets you fired.
Right. But if you have these elite skills, you need to completely invert your thinking. You must view those exact same negative factors as your ultimate leverage.
Oh, I like where this is going.
The very fact that critical minerals are short and that AI talent is exceedingly rare proves the national importance of your specialized skills. The bottleneck highlights your value.
So you tell the government.
You tell the government. You are spending $50 billion on the Cheat Jet PS Act. That investment will fail if you don't have process engineers who understand atomic-level lithography. I am that engineer. Therefore, it is in the national interest of the United States to waive my job offer requirement and grant me a green card.
That is a brilliant reframing. You are using the country's own economic panic as the foundation of your legal argument.
Yeah.
And the upside of achieving that freedom is just massive. We aren't just talking about peace of mind, we are talking about cold, hard economics. The research from our attorney shows that once a green card unlocks full market freedom, meaning you are no longer tied to a specific employer who holds your visa over your head, these high-achieving STEM professionals suddenly command compensation packages well over $1 million a year.
Yes, because when you are on an H-1B, you are captive. You cannot easily entertain competing offers. You can't just quit and start your own AI consulting firm.
And the employer knows this.
Of course they do. They know you won't leave because leaving risks your residency. But the second you have an approved self-petition green card, that artificial ceiling is shattered. You can negotiate openly. You could pit Google against OpenAI.
Wow.
That $1 million compensation figure is simply the true, unrestricted market value of their skills once the visa dependency is removed.
We looked at the case studies provided by Chris Ingram's team, and you see a very clear pattern of how this is executed in reality. We reviewed numerous successful case files, and the common denominator wasn't just that the person had a PhD, it was the clarity of the legal strategy.
The strategy is everything.
For instance, in one case study, a caseworker named Laura was praised for her extreme thoroughness in gathering evidence. She took an incredibly daunting, convoluted legal hurdle and made it feel straightforward for the client, eliminating the confusion.
And that clarity is crucial. Because, translating complex science into legal arguments is really difficult.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
Another case study highlighted how a legal team member named Alexandra completely removed the uncertainty from the process by building a remarkably strong narrative centered entirely around the applicant's specific chip design impact.
Right.
She didn't just list the applicant's coding languages. She focused on how that individual's specific hyper-niche work on power-efficient chip architecture directly supported U.S. technological independence from foreign supply chains.
By connecting the engineering directly to the geopolitical goal, they secured a fast approval.
Exactly. It's all about crafting the narrative correctly for an adjudicator who might not be a scientist themselves.
Exactly. The adjudicator at USCIS probably doesn't know how to code a neural network, so you have to explain the impact of the neural network.
Yes.
We also saw extensive feedback regarding attorney Chris M. Ingram's team, specifically praising their 20-plus years of specializing in the STEM sector. The case studies highlighted how the firm turns intense pressure into progress, successfully handling these complex petitions even when they get hit with RFEs.
Right, an RFE, request for evidence.
What exactly is that?
That is when USCIS reviews the initial application and says, we aren't convinced yet, we need more specific proof of your national importance. Having a legal team that doesn't panic but knows exactly how to respond to an RFE with overwhelming, meticulously structured evidence is the difference between a denial and a green card.
But I want to ask you about the current environment, because it sounds amazing to just sponsor yourself, bypass HR, and secure your own freedom. But isn't there a severe risk right now?
What do you mean?
The same macro caution causing tech companies to freeze hiring, isn't it also making the government strictly scrutinize who they approve for these self-petitions? If the economy is tightening, doesn't USCIS tighten up too?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are absolutely right. Scrutiny is tightening across the board. The adjudicators at USCIS are thoroughly reviewing these applications. They're not just rubber stamping them.
Which makes sense.
But that is exactly why the strategic framing matters so much right now. A well-drafted argument doesn't just present a resume. It translates a technical background into an unavoidable national interest story. You are proving that your specific work directly advances U.S. priorities in innovation, national security, and economic leadership. When you frame it that way, when you show that denying this petition actually harms the United States' strategic goals in AI dominance or semiconductor manufacturing, that is what wins, even in a highly strict, heavily scrutinized environment.
So it's not just, look at my publications, I'm really smart, please give me a visa. It's a compelling argument stating the United States requires this specific technology to survive global competition, and I am the specific person building it. Denying me hurts you.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let's synthesize all of this. We've established the massive systemic problem, the paradox of high demand and sudden employer silence caused by budget cuts and supply chains.
Yep.
And we've established the mechanism of the solution self-petitioning through an EB1A or EB2 NIW. Now, we want to distill the direct answers from our legal team's research into an actionable blueprint for you, the listener.
I think that's super important.
Let's tackle the core questions our team compiled. First, is the shortage actually real, or is it just media hype?
The answer is extremely real and urgently critical. The data proves it. Companies desperately need these exact AI, machine learning, and semiconductor skills.
But,
as we've thoroughly explored, their internal sponsorship mechanisms are broken and unpredictable. The demand for the skill is high, but the supply of stable sponsorships is low.
okay, so a listener might ask, question 2. Should I still pursue employer sponsorship if it's offered? Let's say Google actually does offer to put me through the PRM process. Should I take it?
The guidance from our attorneys is very clear. Only if you have a strong backup plan. Yes, take the offer, but do not rely on it exclusively.
Because it can disappear.
Exactly. It is highly recommended to immediately evaluate your self-petition options in parallel. You simply cannot afford to be entirely dependent on an employer who might get cold feet 12 months from now because the price of copper spiked, or because a new CFO decided to slash the legal budget. Protect yourself.
Question 3 addresses the technical side, which I'm sure many engineers are wondering. Can my specific AI or semiconductor work qualify for these self-petitions?
The answer is a resounding yes, but with a major caveat.
Okay, what is it?
It qualifies when it is properly framed around national importance and extraordinary contributions. It is not an automatic right just because you work in tech. It requires expert translation of your technical achievements into the specific legal criteria of the EB1A or NIW. Your code must be translated into a narrative of national impact.
And question 4 ties back to our hardware discussion. How do these global mineral shortages actually affect my individual immigration strategy?
The research is clear on this cascade effect. They create severe employer caution, they cause multi-million-dollar project delays, they add deep financial uncertainty to corporate budgets.
So you shouldn't tie yourself to them.
Exactly. Proactive self-sponsorship stands completely independent of these external pressures. When you self-petition, you are actively decoupling your life, your family, and your career from the fragile global supply chain of rare earth metals. You are taking back control.
Which leads to the final and most actionable question: what is the very first step I should take?
The immediate recommendation is to schedule a free eligibility audit with attorney Chris M. Ingram. This allows specialized legal experts to look at your specific degrees, your publications, your role, and map out the absolute strongest path forward based on your unique background.
That makes total sense.
But beyond just scheduling an audit, I want to dive deeply into a vital concept that was highlighted in the research, which is the massive hidden danger of aging evidence.
Yes, let's talk about that, the concept of a closing window. Because I think a lot of brilliant people assume that if they just put their heads down and keep working, things will eventually sort themselves out.
That's a huge trap.
It is. Ignoring these market shifts doesn't just slow you down, it actively traps you.
You have to think about it this way. Your professional achievements, your peer-reviewed publications, the patents you filed, your critical leadership role in a major infrastructure project, they have a half-life in the eyes of a USCIS adjudicator.
A half-life?
Wow. Yes. If you led a groundbreaking, highly publicized AI development project 3 years ago, but you've been stuck in bureaucratic PRM limbo ever since, that evidence is aging. In the tech world, 3 years is an eternity.
It really is.
The impact of that achievement is depreciating. If you wait, if you hesitate, colleagues with similar backgrounds who did take action will pull ahead in the queue.
Right.
The self-petition pathways are becoming increasingly competitive. As time passes, your own specialized expertise becomes harder to showcase at its absolute peak strength.
You know, when you lay it out like that, it's just profoundly ironic. The people we are talking to right now, you are literally designing the neural networks that will power the future of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
You are engineering the atomic-level solutions to fix global supply chains. You are objectively the smartest people in the room. But structurally, you are stuck sitting in a hallway waiting on a stamped piece of paper from a nervous corporate HR department.
It's absurd.
It's a completely solvable problem if you just decide to take the wheel.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most important psychological barrier for you to internalize today. Why do so many brilliant, highly logical minds actively outsource their most critical, valuable asset, which is their freedom to work and live, to a nervous corporate bureaucracy?
Why do they do it?
The answer is almost always just a lack of strategic clarity. It's the fear of the unknown legal process. And that is exactly what a professional audit is designed to provide. Immediate clarity. It demystifies the complex legal framework and proves to you that, based on your skills, you actually hold the leverage in this equation.
It's about recognizing your own intrinsic value in the macro landscape, instead of letting a corporation dictate your worth based on their quarterly earnings.
Exactly. And that brings me to a final thought based on the legal research we've analyzed today. The 2026 STEM talent wars unequivocally prove that your highly specialized skills are more valuable right now than at any point in history.
Without a doubt.
But you must consider this. Every single month you delay taking control of your immigration status, you aren't just losing time. You are actually allowing your own hard-earned achievements to age and depreciate in the eyes of federal evaluators.
Right.
Meanwhile, these self-petition pathways are becoming fiercely competitive, crowded with peers who look at the exact same economic data, saw the corporate instability, and decided not to wait. Hesitation isn't just a pause in your career. It is a hidden compounding cost that eats away at your leverage. Are you willing to let external, global uncertainty, a supply chain snag, or a budget freeze dictate your worth, when the legal tools to secure your own permanent future are right in front of you?
Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you gained a lot from this discussion. Please leave us a comment if you can. Additionally, you can support our channel by sharing it with your friends and family, helping us build this community together. Also follow us on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. We would also like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and his dedicated team once again for researching and preparing this material for our presentation. See you next time on Let's Talk U.S. Immigration. Bye for now.